Welcome to the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on news for the drilling industry. I'm your host, Brock Yorty. This week, we're going to discuss per and polyfluoral alkyl substances, PFAS, or that hot button topic we keep calling forever chemicals. But before we get into those, let's talk some safety with our weekly tailgate talk. We prepare for many unknowns on a project. However, do we plan for catastrophic events? What is your emergency action plan? OSHA regulation states for workplaces where serious accidents, such as those involving falls, suffocation, electrocution, or amputation are possible, emergency medical services should be 3 to 4 minutes away. Otherwise, an individual on site must be trained in first aid and CPR. We're small companies. So if only one person is trained in those responses and they're the one that's laying on the ground incapacitated, what do we do there? Patton would say, do we train the way we fight or do we fight the way we train? Therefore, we need to have a plan in place for when those bad situations happen. And suffocation in confined spaces or electrocution or falls or rotating equipment, not to mention caught in between and struck by. We have plenty of high-risk situations on drilling sites that we need to be considering. So it starts with being trained to understand how to respond to an unresponsive individual while we're waiting for that emergency response to get there. Next, what does our first aid kit look like? Is it something we're buying from Costco, or are we getting something that has heavy gauze and tourniquets and something that we can apply pressure with, or if we need to, we can provide CPR? We live in a first world nation where emergency response with the proper triage can reattach limbs and have them fully functional, or with the right chest compressions before the ambulance gets there can be the difference between an partially life for the rest of their life or a full recovered life. And when it comes to understanding calling 911 and asking for a response, there's several things we have to consider. How far away is our hospital? Can we talk them through getting to the job site, from getting to the farmer's third gate on the right to where we are? Do we have reflective material to flag them down? And here's the deal, and this is back to Patton. Do we train the way we fight or do we fight the way we train? Your heart's going to be beating out of your chest, and your colleague or your brother or your best friend is going to be laying on the ground, and we're going to be in black mode. Days later, we'll still be trying to figure out what exactly happened in those 30 minutes before the ambulance got there. So we need to understand where our hospital is, what our emergency response is. If we're going to be working at heights or in confined spaces or an excavation or something extra special, we need to make sure that emergency response is capable of doing that rescue. Because in those confined space situations where one person goes down, generally the first rescuer is the second victim. These are what we need to think about so that we can stay safe and smart, because we work on a pretty dangerous job site. But with the right housekeeping and emergency response and first aid kits and understanding how to get the professionals there, a bad day doesn't have to turn into a bad 3 days with a wake and a viewing. Stay safe out there.
Hi, this is Brock Yorty with the Driller Newscast, and our featured driller for the week is Adam. Introduce yourself, Adam.
I'm Adam Sorensen, based out of Williston, North Dakota, working for S&S Drilling.
It's cold in Williamston.
Yeah,
Williston.
It sure is. Yeah, it's pretty warm today, and it's about 15 degrees. So,
well, we'll jump right into this. Adam, how did drilling get into your blood?
My dad started the company in 1992. The day he tried to buy his first rig was the day that he found out that he was having me. He said one of the most emotional days of his life. So And he's been doing it my entire life. I've been out there helping him, my entire life. And it really stuck when I worked in the oil field here, and when everything turned down in 2015, I came on to him full time, and it stuck pretty hard. Can't get enough of it now.
I'm going to throw a curveball in here because, I grew up in this industry working for my dad. How is it working for your dad versus working in other drilling companies?
Tough.
Yeah, it is.
It's tough, but it's great. I wouldn't change it, but every day is a struggle. We butt heads. We're too much of the same person. So some days we can't get out on another project soon enough.
I had plenty of those days as well. And, my father just recently passed, and I'm damn thankful that I got to spend that time in the field with him and learn from him and butt heads with him and argue and say, this is my way this time because you told me to do it.
Yep. Even my worst day is still a good day, just because we're a family business, spending family time working, doing what we love.
That's awesome. So what is the biggest lesson you've learned on working, if it's in the oil field or with the family business? What's one big lesson you'd like to pass on?
Patience. You can overcome any situation through patience and determination. That's one thing my dad has always drilled into my little brain I have.
That's an excellent point. I think if we'd check our driller ego and take a breath, we'd smash less stuff.
Exactly.
We'd, catch up with our as fast as our heart's beating, our mind could catch up, and we can be a better industry.
Yep, 100% agree. If you can take the ego out of the equation and keep the get it done mentality, but take a step back and evaluate, gather yourself, it makes for a real good day, man.
Absolutely. What would you say to any younger men or women trying to get into the industry right now? What would you say to recruit them?
Stay in it, stay with it. And some days are a struggle, most days are great. Stay with it and you'll enjoy the great days.
That is awesome. Thanks, Adam. And this has been the Driller Newscast featured driller. And if you'd like to be a featured driller, shoot me an email or a text. Email questions@askbrock.com, and we'll get you on, and we'd like to hear your story too. I really want to thank Adam for coming on today. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Brock. It's been a pleasure.
Now on to our featured story. Per or polyfluoroalkyl substances. Good thing this is a Monday morning discussion and not a Friday 5 o'clock discussion to be able to say that. Or PFAS, or these forever chemicals, which are in many types of water resistant and non-stick and foam materials. You can see in the diagram next to me the thousands of ways polyfluoroalkyl substances are used today. Many states have implemented regulations for PFAS in the drinking water that are enforceable standards or maximum contaminant levels for PFAS. These states are Massachusetts, Michigan, New Hampshire, New York, Vermont, and Maine. Many other states have adopted guidance and notification levels for PFAS in drinking water, and this is ever changing from the research I got. In 2016 is when the EPA came up with recommendations and guidance levels of 70 parts per trillion. This is not a regulation, but right now a guidance, which is making this a difficult discussion. We have no different than last week with Farm Bureau and livestock associations looking at our water withdrawal limits and how we should be pumping out aquifers. We now have manufacturers and many other types of lobbyists that are impacting the decisions making on making sure we have safe drinking water. And there's a reason why it's 70 parts per trillion. Sure, you're going to hear from associations and other individuals that 97% of everybody on Earth is already impacted by this forever chemical because it's in the ground, it's in the water, it's in the soil, it's in food packaging for fast food because it's about non-stick. It's unacceptable, and we have to be the ones lobbying and making sure that our groundwater is protected and that our surface water is protected. In late February, Wisconsin implemented regulations similar to the EPA's recommendations of 70 parts per trillion. But that's not what Wisconsin's DNR original plan was. And you can go to the AP and you can take a look at their original recommendations versus where the board settled. The DNR board settled there because they realized that the budget and the cost it would be for water treatment facilities for equipment that would be able to remove these forever chemicals and any water wells that we'd have to replace would be much higher than what was considered. It's even stated that two drillers in Wisconsin, as advisors to this board, said that the DNR's idea of what it was going to cost to drill a water well was off, and it was actually going to be 2 to 3 times that high. Again, if the groundwater is contaminated, the only option is water treatment plants. And when water treatment plants are used, that means it's coming from a pipeline. Look across the country and see how many water wells have been affected by this. Last week, we had a discussion about Pennsylvania, where it affected water wells, that pipeline. And what happened there? There were criminal offenses taken. And sure, there's been lawsuits throughout the country, but they're called forever chemicals. It's taking a lot before we're going to figure out the best remediation plan. Minnesota also has plans in the legislature right now looking at banning these forever chemicals. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of places we need to be. Beyond that, my guest today, Kathy, she lives in a community that's affected by PFAS, Oscoda, Michigan, where many of the residents, over 700 of them, have had to switch from well water to water supplied by their local municipality. Hello, Kathy. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Brock. I'm Kathy Woosterbarth, and I am one of the co-leaders of the Now Need Our Water Community Action Group in Oscoda, Michigan.
The PFAS contamination occurred from the local Air Force base. Tell us what happened there, Kathy.
Yeah, so the Air Force Base was decommissioned in 1993. So it's a former Wordsmith Air Force Base. And it was discovered that there are large plumes of PFAS emitting from this site, in part due to fire training or firefighting training and a crash that occurred in the 80s. But our community was informed that these plumes are affecting the groundwater and some residential water wells. And so as a community, we created this action group or our advocacy group to work through both the CERCLA process that the Air Force has engaged the community in terms of a restoration advisory board, and also working with the state of Michigan and the things that they can do to help with this situation.
How did you get involved with this issue?
Yeah, so in 2016, they did present this information about these PFAS plumes that were coming from the base, and some residents received some notices not to drink their water from their residential wells. So the state and the Air Force held these meetings, and of course, everybody was very confused and concerned, and some were very angry, actually, that we had been exposed to these chemicals. Of course, we didn't know what they were back in 2016. Now we know very well that they're considered forever chemicals and they'll probably never go away. So we need to be working on the remediation and collecting of this PFAS and also protecting ourselves from exposure of future PFAS. So that's where we're focusing our energies right now.
What PFAS groups are you working with right now?
Michigan, as maybe some of your listeners are aware, has many sites because the state of Michigan was looking for these chemicals in the groundwater and municipal water supplies, that sort of thing. And so there are a lot of sites identified in Michigan. So we have made an attempt to link with other communities and share our experiences with how the process works, how Eagle or the state of Michigan works and what they can do for communities. Of course, ours is unique in terms of a military site, so we make a special effort to link with other military sites. But we've become we're connected with a network called the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network, GLPAN, what we call it. And we're new. We just launched this year, last year in 2021. And so we're just attempting to link with other communities because we know that there's more power in in numbers. So we find that that's more effective in terms of our advocacy. And we're also linked with a national PFAS organization called the National PFAS Contamination Coalition. So other states throughout the U.S. We've linked with them, and we work on federal issues like working with the EPA and agencies like that.
It was 2016 when EPA set PFAS guidelines. It's time for the EPA to establish set standards. Do you agree?
Right. They have the standard is set for 70 parts per trillion for PFAS, PFOS, and PFOA combined for drinking water standards. They've been very slow to look at anything more protective of that for human health, and of course that's a concern of ours. And they're saying they're making steps, but they're really not. There's not very much action related to those things.
What type of needs does your community require? How many wells have been affected by PFAS?
What we have, Michigan created some new maximum contaminant levels for 7 or 8 PFAS. And so we're now measuring our results based on those, although the Air Force isn't necessarily recognizing those. But the state of Michigan is, and they're providing us results on those. And so there's many more wells that are affected by that. We do, one thing we're having to do is extend our municipal water supplies to areas that are in the affected areas of the plumes. So that is unfortunately at a cost to our local municipality or township of millions of dollars. So we're working with Congress and the state of Michigan to get some funds to help homeowners to link to these municipal water supplies that is safe at this point.
Michigan has over 1 million water wells. We also have a large number of water well drilling families in the state of Michigan. To hear that the solution is to provide pipelines, municipal water farther and farther into rural communities is not promising for all of these water well drilling families.
Exactly. Unfortunately, some homeowners are choosing not to hook up to these municipal water supplies. It's a $2,000 hookup fee. It's very expensive, and some people just don't have that. And and then that's an extra cost to you, continuously for using that water. So it's a difficult situation for everyone.
What would you like to see the state of Michigan do for PFAS and then the federal government to fight this PFAS crisis?
Well, the federal government needs to establish PFAS as our hazardous substance. That's for certain. And then the Air Force or the military, really, because it affects, military bases in general, needs to be proactive in protecting its veterans and the civilians and the communities that surround these military bases from these chemicals. They need to use, in my opinion, they need to use wordsmith as a spotlight for how to clean up PFAS contamination effectively, and then replicate that in all of the other communities. The state of Michigan, or states in general, need to work very closely with the military and protect its citizens. They are there to protect the citizens of their state and be advocates for those citizens. And that's what we want to see states doing, not to placate to the US military, which is, it's difficult because it's the federal government and they're the big guys. But, we need protections here in our states. So that's what I would ask.
Thank you for joining us today. We all need to educate ourselves about forever chemicals and get involved. The Great Lakes state's lifeblood is our water, and we have to fight to protect them. What body of water is that behind you, Kathy?
That's okay. This is Lake Huron. I'm glad you asked, Brock. This is Lake Huron. Our municipal water supply is right near here, and we suspect that this is PFAS coming from the former Wordsmith Air Force Base, collecting onto Lake Huron. And of course, this is never going to go away. So we just need to be aware that this is going to affect all of us someday. If it doesn't affect you right now, one day you will know what PFAS is.
Thanks again, Kathy. Please visit the EPA.gov to see your state's response to PFAS and to read the EPA roadmap for handling PFAS and regulating it from now to 2024. This is an ever-evolving situation, but as drillers, as industry professionals in geothermal, cathodic, groundwater, environmental, geotechnical, us putting a hole in the ground, there's a good chance we could be drilling through these forever chemicals. We need to understand what the regulation is and how we're impacting our environment. Well, we've officially TD'd our third episode of the Driller Newscast. Thank you for starting your week with me and the Driller. If you have a drilling project, a drilling related story, would like to come on and be a featured driller or a featured industry professional and share your knowledge with the weekly Driller Newscast, email me questions@askbrock.com. Finally, we should be all standing up for better environmental responsible practices. Mother Nature needs us to help. There are many environmental initiatives in works, from lead pipes in our infrastructure to other solvents and chemical contaminations to poor handling of industrial waste, bad drilling practices, bad fracking practices that can overshadow any of these major initiatives. That's why the EPA has to have a roadmap. There's a lot going on there that they need to be looking at. So it is up to us to speak up for our community and nationally when we understand how we're representing our community and how it should be out there for the rest of the world to hear. Thank you for joining us this week. Really appreciate it. Stay safe.